Next, question number 13. Draw a labeled diagram of a section through ovary. Now let's make a diagram of ovary here. Here we have ovary. As we know that inside the ovary, this whole space is actually known as stroma, and the stroma of ovary is actually divided into two compartments or zones. The peripheral zone of the ovary is known as cortex, and the inner portion of the stroma of an ovary is known as inner medulla. Now let's talk about the cross section of ovary. Ovary is having oogonias or primary follicles here. Primary follicles are actually having oogonias inside them. Oogenesis and folliculogenesis actually happen simultaneously. When we talk about the oogenesis, that is the production of egg cell or ovum, it takes place inside the follicles only. When the follicles matures, they grows inside the follicles only. There the formation of ovum takes place. Now, if we talk about the section of ovary, we are having primary follicles here. These primary follicles will grow and convert into primary follicle here, then secondary follicle and tertiary follicle. Here we have is primary follicle, inside which the oogonia cells are present, which are transforming into the egg cell or ovum. Let's make here a tertiary follicle over here. Tertiary follicle, which is having our secondary oocyte granulosa cells, then a fluid-filled cavity over here, the fluid-filled cavity. The fluid-filled cavity in yellow color you can see. This is a fluid-filled cavity showing antrum. So we can mark this as the tertiary follicle. Of course, the tertiary follicle is made through secondary follicle. The primary follicle will transform into secondary follicle, secondary follicle will grow into the tertiary follicle. This tertiary follicle is characterized by having a fluid-filled cavity, that is antrum. This cavity is antrum. So tertiary follicle is showing antrum. Then we have a matured follicle, that is Graafian follicle. That is Graafian follicle containing our oocyte. That is, this is your matured Graafian follicle. We will mark it as Graafian follicle. Now, when this Graafian follicle matures, this secondary oocyte will released from this Graafian follicle after rupturing of this Graafian follicle, and the secondary oocyte will goes into the fallopian tube. So this Graafian follicle here ruptures like this. This Graafian follicle ruptures here, and the secondary oocyte is being released from here. This is ruptured Graafian follicle. This ruptured Graafian follicle will remain inside the ovary and transform into another structure known as corpus luteum. Known as corpus luteum. This is corpus luteum. This is corpus luteum. Corpus luteum is formed from the remaining part of the Graafian follicle, which is being ruptured to release the secondary oocyte from ovary into the fallopian tube. This Graafian follicle will transform into the corpus luteum, which acts as an endocrine gland and produces progesterone hormone, which maintains the endometrium lining and uterus, which makes the uterus suitable for the pregnancy, possible pregnancy. If after ovulation the secondary oocyte does not meet with the sperm and the fertilization does not take place, this corpus luteum will degenerate. This corpus luteum will degenerate like this, and this degenerated corpus luteum will be called as corpus albicans. Corpus albicans. Now, inner medulla of the ovary is having nerve fibers and blood vessels. Nerve fibers and blood vessels. So this is the complete structure or complete section through ovary.